to see you guys all out here. I'm sure many of you are aware it's just a blessing to be back here at Harrison Center after spending a few years here back in the day. Y2K was the thing. When I was here, we had a big room over here filled with stuff in case it was as bad as what they predicted. It's hard to believe that's 24 years ago. Just unbelievable to me. That's been that long ago. But I do want to apologize on Teresa's behalf. She was very disappointed not to be here this morning, but she has a kidney stone that is acting up, and she doesn't feel very good right now. So she would appreciate prayers for that, for the pain, but also that it would pass. We do plan to go camping. Pleasant View is where we attend, and every Labor Day there's a whole group that goes up to the camp in Van Buren together. So we do that, and we're planning to go, but it's a little hard to go when you're not sure, and you don't want to be far from home if it decides to get worse and back up and all that kind of stuff. So she'd appreciate prayers for her in that. She'd definitely love to be here and see you all and share her part of what we're doing. Because that's something we kind of jokingly say to churches, that if you decide to come behind us in prayer and pocketbook, you're actually getting a twofer. Because Teresa has her own separate job description, which I'm really excited about. She has her own skills and giftings, and you'll hear a little bit about what she's doing and see some of that here in just a minute. But she would love to be here and talk about it. She does a very good job of presenting what God has called her to do in BMW. So we were here in 2021 and talked a bit about what we were doing then. In the 3 years since then, there's been a lot of things we've been able to develop and come to understand more and more of what is beneficial to our missionaries on the field, and try and implement those things. And as you might suspect that those who enjoy pastoring probably aren't always great at administrating. I enjoy the pastoring side of what I do, but I'm having to do a lot of administrating things because it's impossible to pastor 500 people in 60 different countries with one couple. So I need to develop the structure and the personnel that can help us make sure no one is falling through the cracks. So we are trying to develop those things. We are doing some personal things while we're building this kind of structure, but let me just give you an overview of some of those things. This is the top line is BMW's motto. We don't want to just plant churches. We want to plant healthy churches. And so we've worked to determine what is it, in our opinion, makes for a healthy church. One of those things is that they have solid leadership, that they have a good doctrinal stance, also that they have an outward view. We don't believe a church is healthy unless it has a view outward, that it's looking to what they can do beyond their own local context to see people come to Christ, that they have a burden for missions themselves, even if they're just a small group, that they already are developing a vision for the rest of the world and how they might partake in advancing the gospel. So if we're going to have healthy churches everywhere, what we say in member care and MK care is we also then need healthy missionaries everywhere. Because you probably recognize all ministry that God is involved in, or nearly all the ministry that He does, comes through people. And so we think it's really important that we have healthy people serving around the world in the places that God has called them. Two words that we emphasized a lot. We talked about this, and it was a delight to have Wes and Bree down at Sakanaga is the name of the camp that we were at, to have them down there at that location, an event center in South Carolina. This is one of the things we talked with them and all of the missionaries who were there about. Our goal in member care is to walk with our missionaries through the highs and the lows. And the reason I want to emphasize this to our missionaries and those who are considering being missionaries with us is that not all missions approach problems with that mindset. That sometimes there's a quick knee-jerk reaction to jerk people off of the field and say, you're no longer a missionary, you need to go back home, get things in order, and then we'll talk about next. Our view is, how can we walk with you through the challenges to where you can continue to minister, where you can continue to serve where God's called you. We want to walk with you and not walk with you to the door and say, see you later. So we want to emphasize that from that perspective, that that's our view as a mission, but also for the missionaries to know they can share their things with us. Unfortunately, not every missionary, even in our mission, believes that. We have a couple who are in a country that is very needy, a Muslim country, and the husband experienced some particular struggles, and rather than allowing us to walk with him, he said, we've got to leave, we've got to go back home, and they dropped everything. He came back to the States. We wanted to walk with them. We can work through this with you. We can help you navigate this challenge, overcome the struggle. We want to encourage our missionaries, and we want to walk with them in member care and not walk them to the door and kick them out. Early on, I was over here at Grace Seminary, and they had a missions conference. We met a couple there by the last name of Carmichael. And they're in member care now, but the process of getting there for them was really challenging. They were in a country, a tribal situation in the edge of a town, and their house continually kept getting broken into. They would be gone and come back and things were gone, and it even got so bad while they were there, they could hear people coming in the downstairs and stealing stuff. And what do? These are people you came to minister to, and yet they're coming into your house stealing stuff, and then they began to fear for their physical safety. And the repetition and length of this time bothered them so much that they literally, their own diagnosis, we were going crazy with the stress and the pressure. But they didn't really believe that their member care team and the mission was for them. So they wouldn't answer calls. They wouldn't inform the mission about their struggles. And so that it got so bad, they left the mission field, bought 80 acres way back in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee, because they simply felt like they couldn't trust anybody. They couldn't even hardly trust themselves. They just knew they were in a terrible spot emotionally, psychologically. And so they literally bought a place 80 acres in the middle of nowhere. We want to be a mission that lets our missionaries know, please don't do that. We want to walk with you in these things. Let us know. We're not going to kick you out. We're going to try and work with you. Obviously, there are some things where maybe we might have to dismiss a missionary, but we want to work through it and walk with them through the challenges they experience. And so we want to have healthy missionaries everywhere and walk with them. I'll share a little bit about what that looks like in just a little bit. It's kind of a small graphic here, but maybe you can see some of these words here. This is something we developed since we were here last time. It's called the flow of care. And what we mean by that is Teresa and I's goal is to develop a structure where we're walking with our missionaries all the way from before they enter, by assessments, all the way to the end of when they retire, whether that's on the field or whether they come back to the States, what that looks like. We want to be there for them all the way through each of these stages. We've developed an assessment program 2 years ago. We partnered with an outside company that has a robust assessment process. Weston Bree can tell you it takes a while, about 6 hours, to go through this assessment process, but it's incredibly helpful to help discover what are the strengths of these folks who are considering missionaries. What is their call to missions? Can they articulate why they're doing what they're doing? What kind of supports do they have? What kind of psychological makeup do they have? What fills them? What drains them? And by that, that's something Teresa talks to the kids about. You might see that here in just a little bit. We talk about the kids with that too, and I encourage you to think about that. But if you're a missionary on the field, and one spouse is really recharged by like large group settings and maybe having a big activity, and that really fills them up. They come away with energy, but the spouse is like, I like quiet, I like one-on-one. If they don't know this going into the field, what's going to happen if their ministry only has one dimension to it? If it's all big group or it's all small one-on-one things, what's going to happen? One or the other is going to be continually drained without getting the refilling from what blesses them and motivates them. And so assessments help surface these things and other significant things so that they can fit well into their ministry context and increase the likelihood that they're going to be able to maintain their ministry there. So we do assessments at the beginning, and also is to discover, are there some red flags that goes into criminal history and things like that. If there's a red flag, we want to know before they get on the field. So we do assessments, field life, there's all kinds of things involved in that, helping care for them in the transitions on the field, with the stressors in ministry, all the way to retirement. Which of you say is the most stressful? Leaving for a foreign field that is rather rough and uncivilized with young children, or retiring from the mission field after 30, 40 years of ministry? Which would you say is the more challenging?
Probably retiring.
I was surprised to learn you're right. That retirement is actually, for many, the biggest stressor in their entire missionary journey. So we're trying to be intentional about coming alongside our missionaries. I don't know about if it might apply to any of you if you had this burden, but we are looking for someone who can be an on-staff, a part of member care, who are social workers, who know the ins and outs of Medicaid, Medicare. If somebody's never had a driver's license, you can walk them through. How do you get a driver's license in the United States? All kinds of ins and outs of coming back to the States can be incredibly stressful, even for those who are really well adjusted and planned well. There are some things that you just don't know. until you get on the ground here and try and actually do it. And so we would love to have as part of our member care team a social worker, someone who knows the ins and outs of these kind of things and can help our missionaries. And we do have a significant wave of retirees coming into our mission, where our mission will be having a significant number of retirees in the next 5 years or so. So that's something you can pray about, and perhaps you might be burdened to come alongside missionaries in that kind of way. We'd love to talk more about that. So this is part of what we call flow of care. We want to cover all the gamuts of what they're doing so that they have support all the way through their missionary journey. This blends together with this slide shows the way we blend this together with the person is in the middle, their own self-care. We want to train them how to care well for themselves, how to implement things into their personal lives that will help them do well, spiritually, relationally, emotionally, physically even. We have a couple that it looks like are going to come on board, not on board, but we're going to hire them to make exercise videos that are available to our entire mission family, to be trainers where we can contact them. If I was even out in the middle of nowhere and I had access to the internet, I could actually interact with them for personal physical fitness training. That's part of being a healthy missionary. So we want to help them develop good self-care. We want to help enhance one another, how missionaries interact with one another, how Christians in the context in which they're living can bless one another, strengthen one another, encourage one another. And then AL stands for their area leader or their team leader, that we also assist the area leader in ministering to the people that are on the field. They have lots of responsibilities, the area leaders. So I'll get a phone call. I'll just use a name, Ralph. So Ralph will call me and say, Ryan, we have this issue that's occurring. I'll just use Europe, for instance. We have this issue that's occurring in Europe right now. My plate is full. Can you take this and run with the interventions and things that are needed here? So I'll take and contact that couple, contact their sending church, and try and work out some way to help them with their problem. So we facilitate on the care team all of these aspects of care for the individual. And then you'll see on the other side there, the sending church. We believe that the sending church has a significant responsibility and role in caring for their missionaries. But some churches haven't been doing it and don't really know how to do that, or perhaps have some gaps, and we can help train and inform them how to care well for their missionaries and partner with them in doing that. Oh, this is just a reminder, we do have an HR wing, and there's some pretty important things in there. As you know, abuse is a big thing in our day, and rightly so. We have developed a robust process of reporting, and the mechanism that I wanted our missionaries to know is that there is an HR component they can always reach out to. This is just a little question and answer kind of thing. So this morning, we had breakfast here. A little bit of touching on cultural things that we might experience. Teresa and I went to Germany in the last couple of days of July and first couple of days of August, because we have about 120 people in Europe in our mission. So they all get together outside of Stuttgart, and while we were there, we had meals with them. What kind of things are typically on the docket for American breakfast? How would you characterize an American breakfast typically? What, Chris?
Pancakes, eggs, sausage.
Pancakes, eggs, sausage, pretty common things.
Cereal.
Yep, cereal. What else?
Fruit.
Yep, fruits.
Coffee.
Yeah, coffee. Yep, that's a common thread I think the world around, or lots of places in the world, coffee. Yeah, so guess what breakfast was like in Germany?
Fish.
On occasion, we actually did have fish, but it was almost the same as lunch and supper every day. It was sliced cucumbers and sliced tomatoes, like sliced lunch meat like salami and pepperoni and lunch meat kind of things. Always 3 or 4 different kinds of bread. Sometimes there'd be a little thing of pudding. Some of the suppers, there was a little beefier meat protein kind of thing, but every meal was pretty much that with a salad. And what are the quantities like in America? If you go through a buffet in America, what are the quantities like? Yeah, excessive. Way more than what can be eaten, or any of these. It tempts us to put more on our plate than what we can eat even. There's so much there. It's not that way in Germany. So you kind of wonder, is there enough here for everybody? There was. Nobody went hungry, but they're constantly bringing it out because it's super fresh. So everything was really tasty. Always had like some kind of vinegary, cucumber, tomatoey thing. for pretty much every meal, but it was super fresh. You could see them at the door swing when they bring it out. You could see them in there with their hands mixing things and stuff. Super fresh, not very much quantities out in front of you, and a lot of the same thing every meal. So I'm thankful it was good and fresh, but it got a little repetitive. So we were noticing a difference in that. If you go to an American restaurant and you sit down to eat, when do you have to leave? You can stay as long as you want to. Not here. Lunch was from 12:15 to 1:15, and about 1:07 or so, someone will remind you in a couple of minutes, all of your trays and things need to be taken over here. You need to put your bowls all in a stack, scrape out everything. Actually, on the table was a little bowl that you would put all your food scraps and paper things in. Take all of that over, stack it over, and be out the door by 1:15. No one was in the restaurant after that stated time slot. Every day, every meal. German precision even applies to their schedule. Now, what else is German precision known for?
Car.
Which one particularly?
Volkswagen.
Volkswagens, and I'm thinking of another one that's kind of similar to the abbreviation for our mission.
Mercedes.
BMW. Bavarian Motor Works. So they're known for their precision, which is great in cars, but that was a little chafing, honestly, to we Americans and other Europeans who don't operate in that kind of tight a schedule. Well, we just sat down and just started eating. We're fellowship. We got to get up and leave already? Yep. It's the way it is. It's the way it is there. So some cultural adjustments that part of the training and things that we want to do is help folks recognize what they're going to be getting into with cultural adjustments and what they'll need to keep in mind. And that's just a little illustration. There's much more significant ones that people encounter. But that's part of what we want to do in training. So this is what Teresa does. And I don't think she had rolled this out yet. Do you remember, what's that little doohickey called there by the word kid?
Carabiner.
Yeah. And do you see a little bit of a wordplay there? Member and TCK, MK, care. You got the word care in there. So we got a carabiner. And Teresa came up with the idea. I thought it was a great one to have a carabiner to kind of represent what we do. And what do you use a carabiner for? Hold things together. So it's a tool for holding things together. You know, for rock climbing stuff, you use it for, you know, connecting your ropes and things and stuff. So it's a connecting tool to hold things together. And so it has a double application. The care component, we want to help MKs connect well with 4 things. I can't remember if I put that one in here now. I did. So this is what she emphasizes, to connect well with their faith. Do you know any MKs who have struggled with their faith, or perhaps some who've never trusted Christ? Typically one in a family really, really struggles with their faith. That's a pretty common experience. So we want to talk about connecting well with your faith. We don't assume the kids that are in front of us when we do MK training all know Jesus. We want to connect them well to their faith, to a relationship with their Heavenly Father, their identity in Christ. That's an important thing. Connect well to your family. Especially when you leave and go to a foreign field, your family is like it. Like all your landmarks are gone, the smells are different, the sights are different, the food's different. Your anchor point's your family. And so connecting well to your family can be really important. And we want to encourage them in that. Connecting well with friends. We spend a lot of time talking about this with the kids and with the parents when we have a chance to talk with the parents. That is super important. You help your kids connect well with other friends, because what do you think is the most common word we hear from MKs? I'm lonely. Even in Salt Lake City, we have missionaries, we have a lot of missionaries in Utah, even in Salt Lake City, where they go to a huge public school because of the strong influence of Mormonism. And if you're not one, you are definitely on the outside. So we've had some of our young people who are in big public schools, on sports teams, and say, I'm still lonely. We want to make sure we're connecting them well with their friends and encouraging parents to do that. We're even as pushy enough to say for one of our families, it's 4 hours to the internet cafe where it's the only place they have internet. And their son was particularly one who's expressing loneliness and a young teen, and he had some friends he wanted to communicate. And we said to the parents, please, on a regular rhythm, drive to that town, get on the internet so your son can FaceTime with his friends. What does that say to your son when you take that time to go do that thing for him? It says a lot. It says loudly that you, son, are more important than my ministry, our ministry here. So we encourage them to make sure they're connecting well and helping their kids connect well with their friends. And I'm going to show you a couple things in just a minute. Teresa's brought up with that. And this last one, feelings. I would submit to you that our stripe doesn't do a real good job about talking about our feelings. There is great value in knowing truth and doctrine, but able to interact with what does that mean? How does that impact me emotionally, relationally? These feelings we have between people. So we spend time talking with the MKs about expressing their feelings and being a safe place where kids can express, which has actually happened. Kids say, I hate God. Mission agencies stink. We've had MKs say that. We want them to feel free to say those things. It's kind of like when you get a medical diagnosis. You don't know what the treatment should be until you get a diagnosis. So if we can get it out on the table, this is what you're feeling, this is where you're at, then we can begin interacting with that. Down at Tippy Valley, when I was substitute teaching down there, they had SEL, social emotional learning, little snippets we had to do at the beginning of each class period. And one of the phrases that stuck out to me, and I still use, is this phrase, name it to tame it. Kind of brings to my mind the analogy of a horse. You know, if you're trying to tame a horse, you've got to be able to get a bridle on it and be able to control it with that. And when you are able to name what's happening in here, you begin to be able to much better tame the things that are happening there and address it with what the Scripture has to say in wisdom and godly counsel. So these are 4 things we talk a lot about with the MKs, and Teresa's doing a great job of teaching those things. She does that through Explore Express. We developed an entire program for training on the 2 weeks at candidate training, or we call it Journeys now. Explore Express is the children's segment, and we go over the kind of topics that we had talked about there just a bit ago, those 4 things. And she partnered with an MK who's an adult and a teacher, because neither Teresa are MKs. So we know we need to learn from others who have been. And so we've sought their advice about what kind of things to say, and she's implemented a wonderful VBS-style program. So lots of components. It operates from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. But parents can get yakking and talking, not come get their kids till 4:45 or 5 o'clock. So it's an all-day thing that we have the kids all day, sometimes 25 or so. And so she developed a whole VBS-style program for that Explore Express. So we do fun things. We bring in water slides and obstacle courses, play games with them. This is a big game, Radioactive Swamp, where you can't step off the cardboard or you lose your leg, or if your hand touches, you lose your hand. You got to be able to make it across the fiery swamp, radioactive swamp. Big parachute. There, we're blessed that one of the fellows that attends our church at Pleasant View is the gym teacher at Madison. So summer, they're not using it, so we can take a lot of their stuff. So we use a lot of things like this huge parachute and things, do fun activities. We take them to plays. There's a Christian theater nearby that we take the kids to. I took the older ones miniature golfing and bowling. So we want them to have a great time so that they can love missions life, this part of it, the training and things. So we've really enjoyed doing that. And then of course, it's the teaching time. Here's Teresa teaching. You can see the Explore Express banner behind her, and to these missionary young people as she goes over those subjects like these. Your faith journeys, hellos and goodbyes. Have you ever moved, have any of you moved a long ways away from a place where you had family and friends? Yeah, Wes has, I have, yeah, several of you have, yeah. Where we've moved and experienced the goodbyes. One of the more important sessions that we have as adults as well as kids is how to say goodbye well. How to leave a place well, including resolving conflicts. So that someone's not across the ocean with this nagging thing, if so-and-so is on the outs with me, I'm on the outs with them, and have that hanging over their head. We think it's important before they leave to resolve those things. So that's all part of hellos and goodbyes. We talk about grief and loss. A couple other things here that you'll see: managing stress, defending your faith, sharing your faith. And I think one of the more important we do is your identity. Who are you? Because if your identity is on your field and being a missionary kid in that location, and you leave to come back to the States, what happens to your identity? It's still back there. It's all wrapped up and back there, and those things, and many MKs struggle with transitioning to a different country because their identity is so wrapped up in what their parents are doing, what they were doing, the country they lived in, that culture. We want them to anchor their identity in Jesus. And so we talk about that. By the way, do you know what TCK stands for? stands for Third Culture Kids. So I'm actually going to pass this around. I want you to just take a look at this and scan it there briefly, and then I'd like your observations about the colors on it. It's just a coffee filter. It's an activity that Teresa does with the MKs. And that's not coffee. That's not some kind of foreign, coffee. That'd be really concerning if it had those kind of colors in it. While you're passing that around, I just remembered a funny incident that doesn't have anything to do with missions, but just in presenting. I was speaking at a pretty good-sized church, and I sent my sermon notes ahead of time. And in between Sunday school and church, I walked by, there was a little stand, kind of like one of these, in the middle of the lobby. And it's amazing how our brain works. Somehow my mind recognized that the pattern of highlighted text I saw in one of those papers matched my sermon notes. I had sent them my actual notes, like the things I print for me, instead of the fill in the blanks. And I was talking, this church is having some internal struggles, so I preached about loving one another. And I actually, on my notes, had names of people that were not good models of that. I wasn't going to mention their names from the pulpit, but I put them there to remind me the kind of things that believers can do that aren't loving. So I snatched those up and threw them away, but I could do nothing about the ones that are already distributed out in the congregation. So I gave them permission to make paper airplanes out of them because they weren't relevant to the message today, or they could wad them up into a ball and throw them at somebody who might be snoozing during the sermon. So I had to swallow a little bit of concern about that. Fortunately, only one of the names had a last name, and it was an unsaved guy that would not be populating a church. An unsaved guy who said he'll never set foot in church again because as a kid, I heard what they said in the sanctuary, and then I heard what the parents said between themselves in the hallway. And it wasn't good. And he said, I'll never set foot in church again. So I was going to mention him, not by name, but mention that in my message, but that was quite a chagrin when I realized I'd sent the wrong notes to the secretaries. What did you notice about this? So we got some green in there. And anything else? So we got some blue.
It's colorful.
And it's colorful, yeah. And kind of random, right? There's not really like a pattern to it. Do you have a guess what the original colors were?
Yellow and blue.
We had yellow and blue put on here, and then just spritzed with water, kind of illustrating the circumstances, location, and things like that, that does something to your identity. Because blue can represent what we call your passport culture. The culture in which you were born. If you lived any amount of time there, any length of time there, you're blue from that passport country. Yellow is the new culture. The culture which you're ministering in, if you've gone to a foreign field, or even for some of our missionaries who are ministering in the context of Salt Lake City, the seat of Satan, the head of a cult. It has affected the entire area. There is a different culture. So we have the blue and yellow. The circumstances, the spritz causes those colors to bleed and intermingle and create the third culture. And that's represented by the green. That's what TCK is, the third culture kids, who often never feel like they fit here completely, nor do they feel like they fit here completely. And so we're trying in our MK Care to help them navigate that and to see the blessings of being an MK. What are some of the blessings an MK might have? What are some things they might bring to the table that wouldn't be typical of your one culture individual?
A lot of experiences.
A lot of experiences. I mean, they've been places, seen things, done things that they'll say, wow, that is so far out there. I've never done any of those kind of things. So they can have a lot of really interesting experiences. Yeah, what else? Yeah, Kitty? What's that?
Tasting weird things.
Yeah. Yeah, they can have a very wide palate because they've tasted lots of different things. There's some pretty interesting things that have been on our plates of mission trips. Yeah, what else?
Music.
So they've experienced different music. They've seen it performed very often in a very, very real, not so professional sense, and can have a wide range. Or when we were in Europe, we noticed the high-class culture Europe is known for, music and art and, all these kind of things. We sense that. And even in that group there, of all the conferences we've been to all of our regions in the world except one. We'll go there, Lord willing, next year. By far, they had the most musical talent. We had cellos, violin, piano, great vocalists singing harmony and parts. The cultural level in Europe was noticeably different than that in other places because that's part of their culture. So getting those experiences. What about languages? Typically they know multiple languages. How do they view travel?
Some drive on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah. You have to adapt to which side of the road, the wrong side of the road, right side of the road, depending on which culture you're from. Yeah, but travel's not a huge deal to them. 12 years old, they'll hop on a train and travel all the way across the city to their destination and back. Some of them a little bit older than that will fly in a plane back to the States, back and forth, across the ocean. Not a big deal. Some of them even said the airport's my home. We've moved so often, I'm more at home in the airport than I am at any house. So often MKs have some of these experiences they can leverage, but often they are overcome by the challenges of not fitting in, especially when they come back to the States. So we try and help them navigate that and view TCKs, MKs all the way through 22 as kind of our cutoff, because that's typically when you've graduated college and you're deciding, what am I doing next? What's my occupation going to be? Typically relationships are prominent then, so we view MK care going through all the way through 22. So that's what TCK stands for, Third Culture Kid, and we use MKs more specifically for missions work because TCKs involves military, diplomats, people who travel to different places and live there for a period of time. So that's a lot of what Teresa's involved in, is she's developed a great program at our Sakanaga, our Journeys training down there. Of all the departments that were there, all the different places, Teresa's the only one that got a perfect score from all the evaluations, so I have to brag on her a bit. That's what she's developed that for the Export Express. Just quickly, Zoom calls. God has given us the technology. COVID pushed out the internet all around the world. We're up in the Andes Mountains in Ecuador. Pretty rugged, come around a really nice retreat center. They have as good of internet there as I have in Atwood. 90% of Ecuador has internet. So we can Zoom with almost all of our missionaries. COVID pushed the internet out like that. Skylink going over. Have you seen Skylink? The row of dots going across the sky? Skylink brings the internet all around the world. We do that on a regular basis. Monthly teen chat groups. Parents have told us this chat group amongst the teens is the closest thing to a youth group our kids have. They get to meet other MKs, share common experiences, and it can be a real lifeline for them. Teresa developed this one, a teenage MK said, I'm really lonely, I'd like to see us do that, and it's really helped her develop that, and she's still helping lead that at 19. And the last thing up here, field conferences, Teresa goes, and typically we run the kids program and do the programming. Other times we go and she's not quite as heavily involved, but those are all part of the ministry that Teresa has, and she's doing a wonderful job with that. One of the reasons why is because how MKs and TCKs are cared for now creates or removes barriers that influence their view of God and how they view Christ's pursuit of them. We want to help them. We want to interact well with them so that they have a great view of God. They have a great view of the work that God has called missionaries to do and who Christ is to them. So we want to be faithful in that. How many of you know what ACEs are when it comes to like psychological things? Adverse childhood experiences. There's actually rating scales where you can quantify that. So perhaps if you've lost a parent, that's high, but that's like in the 40s or 50s. A move can be in the 30s or 40s. So you go and you answer yes or no to all these things, and there's a number. And you can add that number and say if it's above this certain line, you have mild, adverse, moderate, severe. Missionaries, kids, because of the number of moves, transitions, goodbyes, are often in the upper category of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So Teresa encourages parents about this dynamic here. These are called PCEs, positive childhood experiences, feeling heard, making sure your kids know that you're listening to them, feeling prioritized. I mentioned about making sure this lonely young man gets a chance to talk to his friends on the internet. That shows priority. Sometimes we would be very ready to notice when we're making a decision to a parent that would shout to them that this is more important than you, or ministry is more important than you. But often the whispers as we go along that says to the child, ministry is more important than you, add up. You need to make sure they feel prioritized, to be intentional as a parent that your kids feel prioritized, feel safe, that they know this is a safe place. They can talk about whatever's on their mind and that they're physically protected as best you can. Having peers, really important. Again, goes back to those Zoom calls and things that Teresa's kind of putting together. Help parents make sure their kids have peers. This is good. Belonging in a multi-generational group. So even here at Harrison Center, when young people come here, when you as a different generation interact with them, you're actually helping them build a solid foundation of their own identity so that they are able to navigate this world better. Missionaries need to make sure their kids experience multi-generational groupings. Family and community traditions. So you might go to a new place where you know nothing of what their culture does, and what their culture does makes no sense to you and it doesn't appeal to you. Establish internal family traditions. You can do things just like we go on a walk on the beach. If you live on an island, you have missionaries in Vanuatu, go for a walk on the beach every night. And we just talk about the day. That's a family tradition. We know of a family who sets, so in a Muslim context, that the call comes out to pray, 5 times a day? So instead, they set their own internal prayer rhythm. So they have, like the hours in the Bible, like the 3rd watch, the 6th watch, the 9th watch, where they stop and they gather together and pray as often as they establish internal family rhythms to help them have a sense of connectedness. Sense of belonging, particularly when they're in high school, is important. And then lastly, have 2 supportive non-parent adults. So again, that's a role that you can play. To be that adult who's engaged with an MK, that you ask them questions, you interact with them when you Zoom with them or when they visit here. If you have a chance to live near them, that you interact well with them. So these are some things that Teresa would talk about with the parents as we train them to help their kids navigate missionary life well. The last thing that Teresa's involved in, if you've ever been a part of an accreditation process, you know it's a multi-year intensive thing. So she has a spreadsheet that's 25 pages in an Excel document where she has to rank what we're doing in all of these different categories. And then when we get to at least a 3 or higher, we can apply for membership or accreditation with this organization, first of its kind. We think this is incredibly valuable. Not so much to have a stamp on our website or on a piece of paper that says, we're members, we're accredited, but so that we're not missing anything. If we get this accreditation, it shows that we have thought through and worked through all of the different aspects of MK care to be sure that our MKs are well cared for. And that's also then a very appealing thing to somebody who's looking to join our mission, that they know we've done our due diligence to care well for the children that'll be part of our mission network. So, excuse me, Teresa is involved in that. I didn't put in here a picture, I wish I would have, where she's in a meeting with all of the, you know what the C-suite is? They talk about organizationally the C-suite, like the chief operating officer, the chief financial officer, the chief strategic officer. Teresa's like in a room with all the C-suite, talking about these kind of things and how she's building a team and needing their help, what parts they can speak into that. To think that this gal from a little town in eastern Tennessee would be sitting in this room talking to the C-suite of a multinational mission agency is really, really cool. She would have never envisioned that, but she's doing that to help bring about these kind of things, and she's doing a great job at it. Lastly, just for a moment or two, it's probably kind of hard for you to read, but just an illustration of what I do then in my role. This is a combination, really, of mainly one missionary family and an element or two from another missionary family who literally experienced all these things in like a 5, 6, 7 year framework. So they went to a foreign country to learn the language, school, training, all those things, had young children, deployed to their area in that country to serve. Government changed the rules, they had to leave. All that visa stuff that you hear about. Came back to the U.S., took a while to figure out, okay, what's next, God? We thought you were taking us here, now you brought us back. Figure out what the new country is to go to. Go to a different country, not too far away, but a different country. Go to that country, major earthquake, the biggest that they've had in decades. Rattled their house, husband has panic attacks, daughter doesn't even want to stay in a building. Imagine how upsetting that would be if the building that you're in begins to crumble and you have to run outside. Literally shook their world. I can't imagine. I've never been in an earthquake when the literal ground beneath you is moving. That's incredibly upsetting to some. Experienced significant conflict with other missionaries. Unfortunately, on this field, the second place they went, there was a missionary couple who'd been there for a long time and dumped on them a bunch of responsibilities when the agreement was, year 1, you're learning. You're adapting to the culture. You're polishing up on the language. You're just here. And as soon as shortly after they get there, they dump all the responsibility on them and say, by the way, we're leaving. You have to take all of this. And that was not what they'd agreed to. Super stressful. Experiencing significant conflict, mentioned that. They had to leave that country for an emergency medical procedure to come back to the States. The world experts were here in the States, had to come back to the States. That took a period of months and months, incredibly challenging. Redeployed back to the original country. The rules had changed again, so they went back to their original country. All of this, young family, all of these traumas, challenges, all in the span of 6 or 7 years. So what's my role in that? My role is to listen and validate, just to hear them as they talk about what they've experienced and say, that's got to be incredibly difficult. I can't imagine what that's like. I can understand how that'd be super upsetting. That is really, really challenging. The next thing, just gave the dad a big hug. I love being able to be in person. Of course, can't do that on Zoom and things, but I gave him a big hug, and I held him until he wanted to let go. And it was really meaningful. I got to say in his ear, this is from Jesus to you. He cares for you and what you've gone through. Then, evaluate. Where are they? My evaluation is they absolutely need a sabbatical. They absolutely will not be in ministry in a year if they don't get some help. They want it. So I'm planning a sabbatical for them. What does that look like? Well, I'm going to be, might need you to advance that, Tim. Thank you. Guide them in defining a window. So the husband